Hi everybody, welcome to this webinar on what works in youth employment partnerships. And thank you all for joining us. We've got we're still counting up a little bit. I'm going to make a start because it doesn't really matter if people miss my introductory spiel. You're not come to hear me. And numbers might tick up a little bit more, up to 54 people. So that's great. It's great so many people here. So welcome everybody. So my name's Tony Wilson, and I'm the director at the Institute for Employment Studies, and really delighted to welcome you to this discussion about youth employment partnerships. What we'll be talking about today specifically are a couple of things. So firstly is are some resources that my colleague Cristiana Orlando has produced, reviewing the evidence around what works in youth employment partnerships, and a framework for thinking about how we can develop more effective partnerships, with a particular focus on kind of local delivery of employment, careers, skills, and more broader sort of life support for young people around labour markets, education, participation, employment. And then we'll also be hearing from Sope Otulana at the Youth Futures Foundation, Head of Research at Youth Futures, who will be presenting about work specifically around youth hubs, which many of us will know about, but may not know a huge amount about, but are the initiative that the Department for Work and Pensions has been leading with a number of local authorities, community and voluntary organisations, local services, around trying to practically bring together in places employment, careers, skills and wider services for young people. We'll then have plenty of time, I hope, for discussion. We'd quite like to do that in breakouts if we can, so that quite often these webinars are end up being quite a lot of broadcast and then some conversation in the chat boxes. It'd be nice if we could use them a bit like how it used to be, when we could actually meet people in real life to put faces to names and to talk about things that we're doing and share practice and just test with each other whether what we're saying makes sense, resonates, it doesn't, and what we can do to and what the key lessons are and the key learning is. I should say at the start, this project is this program of work is running for a number of years that Cristiana is leading, and it's all around the quality of work for young people, and it's part of a wider program of work that the Health Foundation have funded us and other organisations for, around how we can better support how we can reduce health inequalities for young people by focusing on the wider determinants of people's health, of which employment and employment quality is a really key driver. When we started this work, when Cristiana well, I was going to say when Cristiana first joined us, but actually Cristiana joined us during the crisis. But when we started this work with the Health Foundation, it was before the crisis, and we published a report back in 2019 around these issues. And back then, we always talked about how in the youth labour market it needs support. We need to think much more than just about job entry or just about educational attainment, and think about job quality, think about people's opportunities, how we support people to meet their aspirations and their ambitions. And how we need a much more rounded and coherent approach to how we engage and support young people. With the crisis, we've all been very much in crisis mode, and our concern, I suppose, is that many of those issues may have dropped into the background somewhat as we deal with the really significant labour market effects of this crisis on young people, and broader kind of social effects on young people. I think now, though, we're at a really important kind of turning point where we can actually take advantage of some of the opportunities that have come to us through the sort of adversity of the crisis, around there being a much greater focus on how we can join up services and deliver better services for young people, and actually take advantage of the increased investment that has been made and is being made around employment, skills and learning, but also recognising that there are really significant challenges here. Young people, the youth employment rate is the lowest it's ever been. It's been offset by rising educational participation, but I think we're all concerned that the labour market won't defy gravity forever, and that at some point we will start to see some more significant effects around young people, and particularly disadvantaged young people, as people start to leave education, as the furlough scheme unwinds, as we start to and as we come through this phase of the crisis. So, this is a time when there are significant challenges in the youth labour market. Significant challenges for young people generally, but we also, we approach this as sort of being cautiously optimistic. There's a real opportunity for all of us to think about how we can better work together and take advantage of some of those opportunities with the increased focus on young people, engaging young people and supporting young people that we've seen in the last 12 months. So I won't say anything more than that. I will hand over at this point to Cristiana, and she'll take us through a short presentation on the What Works review and the resources that she and colleagues have been developing. Cristiana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Could I ask either Tony or Sope to keep letting people in if they do come in as your co-hosts?
Yes, will do.
Lovely. Great. So hello everybody, lovely to see so many of you here today, and thanks Tony for the introduction. So most of you, if not all, will be involved in the delivery at the minute of some of the new youth employment interventions and are quite familiar with at least one of Kickstart, Restart, or Youth Hubs, together with many other local interventions which are happening on the ground at the minute. And for each of these measures, cross-sector and interagency work is key, whether it's about service integration or effective employer engagement. But developing effective youth employment partnerships is easier said than done, because partnership journeys are quite complex. They require time, they require resources and capacity, and above all, they require strong mutual understanding and trust between partners to work well. So to help you and help services in this journey, IES, at IES we have developed a set of What Works resources, which include a partnership guide and a case study collection. And the evidence from these resources can be distilled really into these 4 key components that you see here. So the first element on the journey is developing the partnership. And what does this mean? This includes building a true partnership ethos, meaning that partners join forces as a result of a shared vision and commitment to young people, that they establish no wrong doors, which means having more systematic linking of services and a bit less of those vertical journeys through one service or enabler at a time. It is about joining resources through service integration and skills and knowledge sharing. And it's also about involving young people in the design and development of the intervention, treating them as equal partners from the start. And the final key element is to consider the local context carefully, including doing some analysis of the local labour markets and the geography, and the opportunities and challenges that these pose to youth employment locally in order to align skills to the opportunities available. But what do these principles actually mean in practice? So cases where we can see these concepts applied in terms of interventions that have been developed in the past and where these principles have been shown to work are, for example, the Youth Employment Initiative, which was an intervention in England aimed at supporting young people into positive destination, which was focused, for example, on developing local approaches to meet local needs and required bidders to demonstrate strong knowledge of both their local areas and of collaborative work. So this meant that from day one, there was intensive work to scope and involve potential partners and really understand the local area. So that aspect of building true partnerships, which then made a real difference to the quality of delivery later on, once the intervention was up and running. The Engage project in Wales instead looked to support young people at risk of becoming NEET and used a 3-way approach, trying to develop that no wrong door system. So on the one hand, it placed youth workers and restorative justice workers in schools to provide support in situ to at-risk students at risk of dropping out. It partnered with Careers Wales as well, the Welsh Careers Service, to ensure warm referrals from careers services. And it worked with schools to develop transition support offers for students who were living education in the summer. So the strong network approach ensured that no young person would be turned away from support. The Youth Employment Gateway is another initiative which was run in Liverpool and focused on supporting young benefit claimants into work. This intervention had a strong focus on the sharing of resources and knowledge. So it developed joint ventures with Job Centre Plus, for example, employability and IT courses to strengthen referral routes. It looked to source wraparound support for clients through collaboration with council services. And it also worked with smaller local providers to develop specialist support where this was not already available. Talent Match is an example of involving young people in partnerships in a meaningful way. So young people sat on interview panels for the selection of delivery partners. They participated in collaborative workshops to inform intervention design, and they also participated in outreach work. They were treated as equal partners from the very first moment and provided that key service user perspective, which was then essential to designing a good intervention and key to the success of talent match, as we know. So getting ahead is instead a good example of understanding the local context. Two of the key partners of this Welsh intervention, which supported Meet Young People, had an established presence in the community, and they both had strong knowledge of the local labour market and local employers. So this enabled the programme to source a wide range of work placements in key local sectors and really ensure that these placements were individually tailored, which then decreased the risk of a mismatch between the young people's skills and the local opportunities that were available. The second element is then managing the partnership. So when we're talking about managing the partnership, it's really about developing effective referral practices, meaning investing in relationship building early on, ensuring good data governance by building trust between partners to support good data sharing practices. It's about building in monitoring and evaluation processes from the very start to then assess the programme and impact of the evaluation as it progresses, and promoting positive relationships at every stage by maintaining an open and regular communication across all levels and stages of the partnership. What this means in practice, and what we have seen from previous examples, is, for example, in the Liverpool Youth Employment Gateway, where engagement and coordination with Job Centre Plus was a really key aspect of the intervention. So beyond co-location, partners held joint workshops and group information sessions to try and develop shared knowledge of their respective roles. And they also worked together to implement a shared database, which allowed the Youth Employment Gateway staff to know when JCT clients met the 8-week eligibility criteria, which then allowed them to enter the Youth Employment Gateway programme. So there was that constant communication, which then also led to quicker and more streamlined referral practices. An example of good data sharing is the Glasgow Youth Employability Partnership, which was a multi-agency partnership in Glasgow, which had a pivotal role in trying to reducing actually the youth unemployment, the high youth unemployment rates in the area. So the partnership worked with Skills Development Scotland, which is the national skills development agency, to develop a single shared management information system, which was then used by both schools and support agencies working with young people to tackle the big issue that Glasgow is having around gaps in school leavers data. In terms of good monitoring and evaluation practice, a practical example is what developing the young workforce is doing in Scotland. So developing the young workforce is the national strategy to strengthen employer, businesses and schools relations and to improve employer engagement in schools. So DYW works through employer-led regional groups, and they have a dedicated executive team which is responsible for monitoring activities and progress across all of these groups. So this includes tracking progress against local key performance indicators and then reporting it back to the Scottish Government. And this enables the government every year to do performance evaluation reports to share insight and learning on impact and progress of the intervention. And one last example is the activity agreement pilots, which run until 2011 in Samaritan, England, and they were designed for young people aged 16 to 17 who were NEET. They are, for example, a good example of promoting positive relationships, because in some local areas, the programme was able to develop a sort of win-win approach, whereby the agencies who referred the young people to the activity agreements were then able to register entry to the programme as a positive outcome for themselves, allowing them to advance their own targets. So this overcame that issue of competition between services and partners pushing against each other. So this was based really on the programme staff's early days efforts to try and improve shared understanding among referral partners about the ways they could work together in a mutually beneficial way. The third element, which is engaging young people, includes building coherent pathways, which means pathways that are focused on providing young people with smooth journeys and a key point of reference at all times throughout their support journey. It's also about focusing on holistic approaches and offering a package of service and wraparound support, which is both core, like employment support, and add-on services like specialist support. It's about collaborating with a wide range of support and specialist services to reach out to those young people who do not usually engage with mainstream services. And it's about embedding in-work support through practical and emotional, both practical and emotional support, to help young people then sustain those positive destinations. An example is MIGO, which was an intervention developed in Suffolk. And the model was based on the integration of Job Centre Plus within the MIGO brand and identity. And this involved co-location of services. It involves staff sharing the same uniforms and sort of projecting sort of shared identity. It involved joint social events, but also more core elements like client registration meetings where both JCP and MIGO coaches were present, and a shared client caseload. So again, this really helped provide that sense of a unified intervention and programme, which really helped with young people's retention and engagement. The SEAL project was instead a Welsh Government initiative, which supported youth offending teams to deliver additional intensive support to young people who've been in contact with the criminal justice system to help them transition into positive destinations. And one of the main strengths of the project was its young person-centred approach. So where key workers really prioritise working at the young person's space and level and try and co-develop support journeys with them. And this approach really relied on thorough assessments of participant needs and strong relationships with partners to source very specific and specialist support and develop some bespoke solutions where there wasn't any readily available provision already. The Engage project in Wales instead was finding that effective engagement of neat young people in the area was proving quite hard. So what happened was that advisors then started working out of Job Centre Plus offices twice a week to engage the group of young people who were regularly attending to claim benefits. And they also started working with community first advisors, which was a service working to support vulnerable and deprived groups in the community, as they had that experience of targeting and engaging that harder to reach cohort that the engaged team was having trouble engaging. And this approach supported the engagement of around 500 additional young people, which the project expected they would have not been able to reach otherwise. And in Talent Match instead, for example, young people were offered in-work support. And how did this work? This was provided either by the young person's key worker or by a member of the dedicated employer engagement team on the programme who had brokered their job opportunity previously. And the main type of support that was provided was either around transition to work, including things like practical support or advice on workplace behaviour, but also things like emotional support and issues which could impact the young person's ability to sustain work, and some support around progressing with work. And the Talent Match valuation found that this type of support that happened after the young person's participation in the programme made a really big difference to how many young people managed to sustain their job outcomes, their EET outcomes long term. And the last key element in the sort of quadrangle is engaging employers, which includes developing varied and long-term approaches, which means giving employer choice and flexibility in the type of engagement that they do and coordinating and building this engagement over time. It's about investing in dedicated resources and staff, enhancing education and business links by providing shared platforms for both education providers and employers to mutually influence employment and training provisions. And it's about focusing on quality at every stage of engagement with employers, discussing what good quality means when brokering those opportunities. So one practical example is the youth contract, which had a strong focus on supporting 16 to 17-year-olds who were NEET. Many of the employers that the youth contract sought to engage were SMEs with an interest in supporting young and employed people, but very little experience or capacity. So the program sought different and quite creative ways at times of engaging these employers, from coaching sessions to financial incentives for training where these were available, to brokering apprenticeships, but also in areas where there weren't large resources for employer engagement, the teams still sought meaningful ways to engage with businesses, like doing group information sessions or group workshops. The Youth Employment Scotland Fund was instead a programme run across Scotland, and its key provision was a wage incentive for employers to support young and employed people into paid work placements, and to support business engagement, which is often one of the trickiest things, as we're seeing now as well, despite even where there are wage incentives available. To support business engagement, some local authorities in the Youth Employment Scotland Fund provided screening and shortlisting of candidates beyond just job matching, which was particularly useful for smaller businesses with limited recruitment experience and capacity. There was then also dedicated staff which worked with employers on business mentoring or some sort of small one-off engagement to try and manage the expectations of what the young people could do and what their experiences were, and to support job retention once the young people had started work. And a wide range of employment-focused support was also provided by MyGo, and this included support for the young people with job applications, online tests and interviews to prepare them for their job interviews, but also support with recruitment and the screening for employers. So the support was really focused on trying to align young people's aspirations and the skills and opportunities offered by employers, which enabled MyGo and the staff that was working with the young people and the employers to spend enough time sourcing high quality jobs for candidates, which had a focus on more aspirational jobs and job prospects, which were also more likely to be sustained by participants and could enable them to progress in work. So this was a quick overview of what each of those 4 key elements of successful partnership work entail, but the resources were developed to provide an in-depth step-to-step guide and detailed insight into good practice. So a partnership guide outlines key practical steps and actions to successfully develop each stage, as well as a toolbox of additional resources you can use to help yourself at each stage of the process. And there's also a traffic light exercise to check your progress at sort of each step of the way. And the case study collection really drills down on what previous youth employment support partnerships have done, which I've only given you nuggets of so far, and the outcomes that they achieved, what worked well, what worked less well in these interventions, and the key lessons that we can take from them. So that was a quick run through, and I'll now hand over to Tony.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cristiana. I've just put in the chat just links to the What Works resource and the case study collection. And I thought it was a really good run through and a pretty detailed run through the findings at What Works piece. But actually, there's a ton of really interesting and hopefully useful detail in the PDFs as well, which really gets underneath some of those key ingredients around what has worked well. And indeed, for each of the dozen case studies, a little more background and context and the pitfalls that they encountered and the things that worked well and so on. So hopefully of use. I'm really keen to get your feedback on it. We're going to go straight into hearing now from Sope Otulana, who's the head of research at Youth Futures. Then after that, we'll take some time just for some immediate questions and feedback before we then do some, hopefully have time for some quick breakouts. So Sope, over to you.
Thanks, Tony. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Everyone can see that because I've lost the Zoom call from my.
Yeah, Sope, we can see it. It's showing up as we can see your PowerPoint rather than the sort of presentation view at the moment.
Okay.
But I think once you click on
yeah,
that's it. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone. So as Tony said, I'm Sope Otulana. I'm head of research at the Youth Futures Foundation. And the presentation I'll be going through this afternoon is just, there's actually quite a lot of similarities with the presentation that Cristiana shared. But Youth Futures did a piece of work looking at some of the same programs, MyGo, the Youth Employment Gateway, and Talent Match, as well as others, to understand key learnings for the Youth Hubs program and what best practice, what opportunities there are to capitalize on co-located services for young people. Just by way of quick introduction to who Youth Futures Foundation is, for those who might not be aware, we are an independent not-for-profit organization started in 2019 with funds from the Reclaim Fund to address some of the racial disparity audits findings around youth opportunities and employment. So we work by removing structural and systemic barriers to employment and progression and equipping young people from diverse backgrounds to access and progress into work. We work around 3 key areas, one which would traditionally be called the research and evaluation function, but we call identify, which helps us to share what works and why it works with key stakeholders. We invest, so much of our endowment is focused on investing in promising interventions and generating evidence and building capacity of practitioners in the sector. And we ignite change by influencing behavior and practice across the board. So that's a very quick introduction to Youth Futures. So why youth hubs? In light of the impact of COVID-19 on young people's employment prospects, as Tony was discussing at the beginning of the session, there's an urgent need to roll out youth hub services that provide that accessible one-stop shop that encourage young people, especially those furthest from the labor market, to access support. So as part of, my apologies, as part of this presentation, as I described, we reviewed the effectiveness of co-located employability support services. We wanted to develop an understanding of the learnings so far. We completed a rapid review of various research and evaluation reports. So as I said, we looked at MIGO, Employment Gateways, Talent Match, and a number of other pieces of research. And as part of that, we identified some key principles for consideration, which we'll go through now quickly. And there's, again, quite a lot of similarity with what Cristiana has presented. So the key principles that came out of our review were around robust governance systems, effective project management, a collaborative culture, and that's both in terms of partnership and collaborating with young people, and then practical experience of partnership working. So I'll go through each of these quickly now. In terms of robust governance and project management, there are some findings from the review that on their face are actually seem quite obvious, but had important implications for how co-located services can be most strategic and most effective. In terms of governance, the review found that governance systems need to be included at the strategic level to provide effective leadership. So our review found that the most effective models had inclusive and constructive working arrangements where members had equal input and could talk openly about their challenges. So leaders, the review found, should be willing and able to consider establishing meaningful partnerships, not just with other organizations, but with local authorities, Job Center Plus, and other public sector organizations to better integrate employability support at a sub-regional scale and work across business districts and communities, towns to create systems within their place, irrespective of whether they're part of a devolved area or not. From a project management perspective, again, a finding that might seem obvious on its face, we found that good project management is really important to providing oversight and coordination so that everyone in the partnership knows what their roles and responsibilities are. And we found this is particularly critical at the early stages of rolling out a service. So when considering how co-located services can work best, again, focusing in on those early stages and things that can sort of go wrong or be made or broken by good project management in the early stages of a co-located service arrangement. For example, in addition to partnership agreements, the review found that many organizations felt that service level agreements would be beneficial for operational service delivery between partners, particularly to coordinate working practices, make responsibilities clear, and also importantly, plan for services. In terms of a collaborative culture, broken this into 2 parts. So part 1 is the co-design with active feedback from young people. Again, another potentially obvious statement that the involvement of young people is extremely beneficial to creating services that they'll engage with. So our review found that involving young people in the program co-design and co-delivery was a defining feature of Talent Match, for example. Young people were involved both formally as members of partnership groups, as Cristiana described, but they were also found to really been instrumental in activities ranging from marketing, evaluation research, outreach work, media, management of partnerships themselves, and being core parts of community groups and committees, and even the delivery of services. So that collaborative culture was a thread across that the review found across co-located services that had successfully been delivered. Another aspect of a collaborative culture is during the delivery, it's vital to involve young people who are themselves receiving support in defining their own training and employment needs. And again, young people being at the heart of the work, allowing them to define what success looks like for themselves is an important part of the culture of a co-located service that is successful. A second part of the collaborative culture is around the approach to data systems and the review and evaluation of services. The sharing of data between statutory and non-statutory agencies on an informed consent basis makes life easier for advisors and has found to vastly improve the quality of support offered. For example, the MIGO program, the Suffolk County Council, in partnership with People Plus and Job Center Plus, deployed a range of partnerships with organizations in contact with their target groups. So these were local authority teams, schools, colleges, training providers, employers, and some specialist organizations such as local charities. However, their reflection and what came out of our review was that these partnerships were only effective where there were simple referral processes, such as those that Cristiana touched on in her presentation, and good quality data systems and sharing processes. These were found to be an important part of improving and maintaining the quality of support. It was also found that local authorities play a lead role in sharing supply and demand data to enable the alignment of support services. So local authorities act as both a broker and user and analysts of that up-to-date information on supply and demand, so that partners can better understand the underlying barriers to employment in any given area and how to tackle and plug gaps. The review also found that effective ways of improving referral rates were an important part of a collaborative culture and successful co-located service. So for example, the Liverpool Youth Employment Gateway program and JCP staff introduced a number of really practical steps. For example, they maintained a database of all new claimants so that everyone was aware of when their 8-week eligibility criteria would be met. There were pre-referral of potential participants to the gateway after 5 weeks of a claim, which allowed the program providers to identify potential participants and prepare for them well in advance of their referral. There were also a number of exchanges between Gateway staff and JCP staff to make sure that both sides were aware and understanding of what information would be received about program participants and what would be needed. All of this facilitating smooth referral and successful referrals. And the last aspect of a collaborative culture from this perspective is around testing and learning, which is supported by early, robust evaluations to understand what works. The Youth Hubs model offers the potential for a coordinated nationwide evaluation by learning actively what's happening on the ground, capturing and sharing insights across the network. The Talent Match program, which Cristiana also mentioned previously, was designed to develop and test innovations in support of young people towards sustainable employment. Models of partnership, and what we can learn from that program and our review is that models of partnership working should be responsive to local need and learning about what works and what doesn't, and allow this to inform delivery. From the Talent Match review, we found that 15 out of the 21 Talent Match partnerships indicated that during the program, they had changed some ways in which their activities or services were delivered. And all of these partnerships agreed that those changes had improved delivery. So again, a collaborative culture of sharing data, understanding joint systems, and ways of working, and allowing review and evaluation of services to be shared widely provide more opportunity to improve service delivery. And lastly, linked to this is partnership working, which again was a crucial point that Cristiana pointed to. One of the things that the review that came out of the review was that lead partners' capabilities and experiences are an important role in setting the direction and tone of the partnership. And this is maybe again obvious on its face, but the skills, capacity, and indeed the legitimacy of lead partners were essential to the formation of effective partnerships. These factors enabled partnerships to develop quickly and led to effective management of relationships between partners, both strategically and in terms of delivery and operational aspects of the partnership. Lead partners therefore need to be able to act as independent brokers in not only driving the service, but addressing challenges, managing performance of partners, and more broadly coordinating the actions of the partnership to be responsive to young people's emerging needs and new opportunities. Partnership working also raises the issue of creating a culture of strong relationships and partnerships. Our review found that from senior strategists to frontline staff, co-location offered opportunities for stronger personal and professional relationships between staff of different organizations, supported by collaborative leadership and good governance. So again, being in the same place not only allowed people to work better together, but actually improved the nature and quality of the service, allowing for work coaches and key workers to ensure what they called warm handovers and make sure that support services were better tailored and effective for individual young people. And a third consideration that the review brought up in terms of partnership working was around previous experience. Again, not only leaning on the experience of the lead partners, but also of all the members of the partnership. Partners with previous success of co-located services instilled confidence, and where partners operated in the same local area, they were often more able to utilize their existing contacts to offer speedy service. So there's a benefit to bringing that track record to bear when looking at co-located services. And this is an ingredient that wasn't on the initial list, but is absolutely important and crucial to keeping young people at the heart of co-located services like youth hubs. And that's about how we attract and engage them. We've thought about this in two ways. One is around the environment, and the other is the tracking and the nature of the support they're receiving. So creating an appealing and inclusive environment is vital. And that could be different for different types of young people. Some may really enjoy the social aspects of a group setting, but those with additional needs and barriers may find it unsettling or overwhelming. So ensuring that young people who are the target group for the co-located service find it accessible is a crucial aspect of success. For example, Suffolk County Council initiated the MIGO program in partnership with People Plus and JCP, and they developed a successful approach to attracting and engaging young people. They focused on accessible and youth-friendly locations, creating a brand that was appealing and quite distinct from the JCP brand, which is often off-putting to young people, whether they are claimants or not. Creating personalized coach-led support and recruiting high-quality staff who were enthusiastic and approachable. And our review found that these were actually some of the key elements of success for that co-located service. It also allowed them to engage young people who traditionally have not found such services to be as accessible. So in terms of attracting and engaging young people, these are some of the key themes. So creating the right environment, outreach services for those who've not traditionally been engaged, as well as active case management and high quality coaching support. And one last point on that, on the coaching support, key elements identified through the review in terms of what is high quality coaching support included one-to-one coaching that was found to be the most valued aspect of the service. So that individualized support, being treated as a unique individual and feeling that they were supported to a job that they could aspire to. Our review found that young people value advisors or coaches who are helpful, caring, approachable, and knowledgeable, and have sufficient time to build up that trust. Having a good relationship enabled advisors to encourage participants to apply for jobs or courses they may not have considered and to weigh up the options. So this is, again, quite a specific point on the coaching support, but co-locating that kind of support in a place that's accessible and engaging for young people was found to be a really crucial element of support and success to co-located support services. I realize I've gone a bit over time, so I'll leave it there and welcome your comments and questions on this presentation.
Okay, great. So we've got about thanks Sope, that's great. Some really common themes there, and also some really good detail around some of the specific points around the culture of collaboration, around effective governance, and around the importance of co-location as well. All really helpful stuff. Now, we haven't got any questions in the chat. So Cristiana, what do you think? Do you think we've got time to do a quick breakout? 10 minutes?
Yeah. We can do a quick breakout of 10 minutes. We have just a couple of questions that you might want to chat about in your rooms. This is just an opportunity for you to have a chat about the insight you heard today that we shared. So I'm just going to pop these in the chat here, which everybody can see. And I'm now going to break you out in rooms, and you can have a 10-minute chat, and we can come back and.
So look, we really want to hear from you about what you think is working well and what the key challenges are, and what support you think is needed. And then what we'll do is have literally like 10 minutes, if that's okay. See how we go. Then we'll come back and nominate somebody to just give like a minute's feedback as well. So let's do it. Thank you.